So that's me just popped on the recording. Without too much introduction, I'm going to pass over to Rowan. So Rowan is the lead teacher of YPI and she, at Jedburgh Grammar School, and she is going to share just some very broad reflections on her experience. So I was very pleased to be part of the Jedburgh YPI Final last Friday. So she is done and dusted with the process for this year, and it was a really, really great event to be part of. So I'm going to hand over to Rowan just to share some reflections, and then we can open up for discussion, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So as Alex said, I'm well, I have been leading YPI this year at Jedburgh Grammar. I was an NQT here last year, so I was supporting another member of staff, and then have taken that on this year. So obviously we're in the Scottish borders. I'm not sure I understand. So it's my watch listening to me. We deliver our YPI to our 6th year. As we're in the Scottish borders, quite a small group. So we have 30 pupils. So they are our group that we're delivering to. We do that, I'm just checking my dates. I had to check earlier on because I couldn't remember, but we start early September. And then as Alex said, we finished late November. So we had our final last Friday, which was really good. The timing of it suits us quite well because obviously after Christmas, the seniors are into their prelims and their exams. So it's quite a good period of time we find for them. So we deliver it twice a week. This is over 2 study periods. So that's when they will be doing it. A lot of them also do it in conjunction with the SQA Leadership Award. So if they're doing it with that, they would lead their group as part of that. So the next thing I was going to have a wee chat about was just any adaptations we had to make due to obviously current circumstances with coronavirus. As Alex had said, we weren't able to have a representative with us, of course, to launch our programme. So we did that through the video that was provided to us by YPI, and also ensuring that all the pupils had a copy of the booklet, which I'll come back to later because we find that really useful as well, just for time management. So yeah, we launched with the video and the booklet, and also we were really lucky that our 5th year, that are now our current 6th year, were present at the final. So they had seen last year's presentations, so they sort of had that benchmark, and they knew what was expected of them sort of in the end. That was sort of the first thing that we took note of this year. Obviously, as we weren't able to have our 5th years in our presentations, we made sure that we had it recorded, so that when our 5th years come up next year, they're able to watch those presentations to have the same sort of end idea of what they're aiming for. I think one of the biggest adaptations as staff, especially because it's a 6th year group, was trying to maintain sort of social distancing with the groups in a classroom. We're quite lucky that we can have them all in one place at a time because they are a small year group. I think actually though the restrictions, I think, gave the kids more autonomy. Once they were in their groups, a lot of the time we would have them together for the start of the period, set them targets either using the booklet or different deadlines. So just a couple of notes I got written down was, for example, at the end of the week, you need to get back to us with a social issue that you're passionate about within the local area. The following week might be, right, this week you've got to research these charities and get back to us with a charity you have chosen that sort of qualifies for the, for the sort of different standards they have to meet. So I think we sort of did weekly check-ins with the year group, but actually gave them a lot of autonomy to go off and work in their groups. I don't know if anyone has seen the new Jedburgh Grammar campus, but we just moved into our new school in August, and it's very open plan. There aren't sort of traditional classrooms with doors. We've got a lot of breakout spaces. In the corridors, we've got a lot of booths and things like that. So once we'd sort of set our parameters, they would go off, complete the tasks, and then get back to us with what they'd researched, really, just to keep us in the loop. One thing that I definitely would do next year is give them an overall timeline. Last year, we sort of, because we had them in one class, we were, I think, spoon feeding them a lot more. whereas this year it was very much weekly targets or period by period targets. And I think now that we've done that, we've got this timeline and can give that to them along with their booklet and say, right, this is what you need to have done by each point. And then also the pages in the booklet that support sort of each bit of that research. I think motivating them at times was tricky. So having the pages to say, right, you need to have this completed and so on, help them keep it together, which, yeah, I found really useful. Just another sort of challenge that was faced, of course, with the charities is the outreach side of it. Last year, our sixth years were really proactive at going out, meeting their charities, often taking part in any activities that some of the charities, deliver for the local community. So that obviously wasn't able to happen this year, but they were really good with sort of initial contact made by telephone or email. And then just a lot of Zooms was the sort of end result of that, making sure they were doing thorough research, so interviewing their charity or a representative from their charity, and a lot of sort of their planning for their presentations was, so what can we do with our skills once we're able to. One of our charities, for example, was Borders Disability Sport, and the group that did them have sort of made plans for how they can support that charity or continue links with that charity once we're back up and running. One sort of benefit, I suppose, was organisationally, I think the groups found it easier to arrange time for Zooms rather than having to go off campus. It actually was quite useful to be able and quite flexible for them to meet with people in that way, which I think quite a lot of businesses have realised during lockdown and things like that, that it's actually a really useful platform for meetings. So they enjoyed that. And I think the nature of some of the charities, not all of them put on not public events, but public sessions or things like that for safeguarding reasons. So it actually worked out just as well as it would have done, even if we weren't in the current situation. Just to sort of go on a little bit about sort of the format that we followed. Like I said, we had sort of weekly deadlines for them to make sure they were making their way through the stages of research and selecting a charity. Once we'd got to the sort of stage where they were ready, well, putting their presentations together, and we ensured they had the judges' guidelines or the sort of checklist that they were looking to work from for their final presentations. Every group presented at a semi-final. I think feel like we're obviously quite lucky that we've got a small number of groups, so it only lasted a double period, which we were able to rearrange with studies and PSE. So we had a semi-final with all the groups on the Friday afternoon. We had a judging panel of just basically any staff that were free. So there was some free period 4 and some free period 5. So basically just whoever was free to come and watch and give feedback. All the groups got their feedback, but it was particularly good for obviously the 3 groups that went through to the final, because they were able to make any adjustments or improvements that were needed to be made for the following week. As I mentioned before, our 5th year we're at the final showcase for the presentations, which obviously made it quite an event because you've got more of your peers there. So this year, our judging panel consisted of our head teacher, which we didn't have last year. And I think having her there helped make it sort of a bigger event, especially due to guidelines. I think it's the first time she said she'd had them all in like the assembly hall together, because they've just not been able to do that, which I think they really enjoyed. We did try to live stream our finals to the S5s who were in PSE, which is something we're going to try again, but our technology wouldn't let, so we could get the picture up on Teams on the board, but the sound was only playing through an iPad, which to a class of 5th years isn't ideal. So we just had to film them, which we're then going to show them. one sort of last thing that our department did to try and create more of an event, the art department created a giant check, so it's kind of like a mock check, and I think the groups enjoyed that, as obviously in previous years you do get the mock check, so that was sort of one thing that made them feel quite excited about, especially due to the lack of audience. But no, overall, really enjoyed it. Thanks to Alex for her patience. I didn't realise that Zoom didn't work on our school iPad, so she was sort of a face on my phone being carried about for deliberations and watching the presentations. So that was really useful. So the last thing I just wanted to speak about was, so like anything I wish I'd known before type thing. I actually completed YPI as a pupil back in 2008. So I was racking my brains when I first started delivering it last year, helping to deliver it. And I think one of the key things that the pupils get from YPI is the sort of the shock that there's all these, well, not all these social issues, but they're aware of social issues, but I think the specificity of what's going on in our local community, especially in Jedburgh, because really, really tight-knit community. So I think that awareness of the struggles that are going on day to day, and I think having that in the current climate, having that awareness is really important. So I think something that we really want to try and work on is having sort of like longer lasting, meaningful relationships with the charities that we are engaging with. I think often with YPI, I know last year we sort of felt that it ended and that was it. It was just this sort of 3-month process and then it was never spoken of again type thing. So we tried to sort of encourage the sixth years to work out ways they could have a more lasting relationship. A couple of things we've spoke about, one of our groups chose a charity called SSAFA, which is a veteran support charity. And they've decided that in school, they're going to do fundraising around Remembrance Day with our Poppy Appeal, but to raise awareness and money for this charity year after year. So even when they've left, not possible for all the charities, of course, but sort of as an extra motivation in a way being a longer project. The other thing was just for next year, we're hoping to implement second and third place prizes, which I'd spoken to Alex about a little bit, to try and motivate the groups a bit more and as well make it more of an event. But yeah, overall sort of many challenges, but also a lot of successes, and like I mentioned, things that we actually wouldn't go back to now we've changed them due to COVID. So yes, overall really enjoyed it and look forward to delivering it again next year. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rowan. I thought some really, really insightful comments and reflections and really honest reflections as well, I think, in terms of your experience. Some of the elements that I really liked that you picked out were lots of kind of practical tips and advice around some of the sort of challenges that you came up against, either with the programme in general or the process in general, or with the kind of COVID hurdles that you've had to navigate, and then kind of how you solve those. And I think some of the kind of reflections around the tech piece are just so relevant and so valid at the moment. But obviously there's a lot of thought going into as well within Jedburgh, the kind of the place and fit of YPI, what you get from it as a school, and the legacy of the programme. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to pick up on, especially given that you deliver with your 6th year. Because we can sometimes find with those senior phase deliveries that because the young people who've taken part leave the school and move on, I think that legacy piece becomes even more important, that it continues to be a kind of a whole school process, and that the whole school are bought in as much as possible. So I think your ideas around being able to continue to engage with the charities that you've worked with through YPI is a really fantastic one. Does anyone, while I think we've got about 5 or 10 minutes of your time, Rowan, maybe 5 minutes of your time.
10 minutes, grand. My first point was at 5 to 5. So.
Perfect. Rowan's got a parents' evening tonight, so we're really delighted that she's squeezed in to join us. It must have been a bit of a juggle to have the school day and then come and join us to speak and then be at parents' night. So we really appreciate it. Can I kind of open up the floor? So we've got a couple of protocols in place. If you want to ask a question, please feel free to type it into the chat and I can ask it for you. Equally, we'd probably be really delighted if some of you wanted to jump off mute. So if you do want to jump off mute, you can either kind of raise your hand and wave at me if you've got your video on, or you can use the raise hand function or one of the reactions within Zoom, and I'll be happy to bring you on. So David, could you do you want to kick us off? I can see that you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks very much, Rowan. That was great, really encouraging as well. It sounds like it's gone really well. I wondered actually just about the contacting of the charities from the pupils via Zoom. You know, I just wondered about maybe if there are any protocols that you have for there, if they're using their own accounts, if there's kind of school accounts or something like that.
Yeah, so all the kids have like Glow email addresses. So any contact they made would needed to have been through their Glow emails. I think sort of it's an interesting question because I'm thinking now for next year, but definitely supervision wise, I think because they were 6th year, we weren't as not on top of them, but if they were Zooming their charities, they would let us know when, but we weren't normally present for all of them. So it just depended on where they sort of stationed themselves, because there was myself and Hamish Johnson, who's a science teacher, who oversaw it. He was more the technology and practical aspects. So we would sort of just circulate and catch them as we were circulating. But no, I think it's a great question. Definitely their school emails. And yeah, I'll think about that for next year as well. Thankfully, nothing went wrong, but it's a good thing to think about for, you know, if something did, especially with Zoom. It's not a private function. We did try on Teams, but it doesn't let you add anyone that doesn't have like a school email address, which was tricky. Something to think about, definitely.
Yeah, we've been finding with a lot of the engagement that we've been doing with external partners, it's worked if the external partner has sent an invite, it can be accessed through Teams by the external partner and by the students or the school. But certainly because Glow, for obvious reasons, is kind of locked down in terms of the safeguarding aspect, it is a little bit tricky. So I think you raise a really good point around, you know, making sure that you're comfortable as a school and kind of working in line with your school and local authority policies around video calls and so on. And we know from engaging with all of our schools across the country that everyone has slightly different approaches to that. And certainly we can kind of share further experience of other schools and other local authorities as well, if that's helpful. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to pick up on from Rowan's presentation, or anything that they're kind of thinking in their own context might be useful, or sort of things that you're thinking about or planning? I'm gonna let the silence hang for a moment and just see. There we go. Okay, thanks, John. So you're thinking of using Skype for Business via the teacher's laptop? Yeah, that's ideal. And I guess do you have Skype for Business enabled through Glow? Is that how that works for your school context?
No, I don't have. That's the issue we had, because I've got a student teacher in with me just now, and her mentor, you know, her professor from the university wanted, and he said we'll just use Teams, and it didn't matter whatever, because Teams is very much protected. So I thought Skype for Business, because teacher can control that, and then so the pupils have to go. So I'm going to be doing it with second years, so it's very different from your situation, Rowan.
Okay.
I was thinking teacher funnel the control, you know, and then they can say, right, it's set up. You have to organise that during one of your 2 teacher sessions to do that, and then teacher can supervise as well a little bit, you know. So you go and do the call, but that's supervised. I think that seems to be the best way, because I think, if I'm right, for Skype for Business, I don't know if anyone's used Skype for Business on this, you can actually put in an actual mobile number or something like that. So it's more flexible.
Yes, yeah, no, that's definitely my experience in speaking to some schools across the country, John. They're employing a similar approach, so perhaps using a central laptop or a central device, and having those sessions supervised where they can. So that's very reflective of what's going on. Any other kind of questions or queries or observations at this point? I have also, Rowan's very kindly offered to sort of answer any questions that you might have after the event as well. If anything kind of pops into your head that you wish you'd asked or commented on, then please feel free to pop that through to us via email, and we can pass that on and get that answered by return email. That won't be a problem.
Just a quick one. I don't want to hold you as well, Rowan, but the judges, I was just wondering about how you got the judges along to judge the final.
Yeah, so it was just a whole staffer email for that. So like I said, I think timing wise, we're quite lucky. So our last 2 periods on a Friday, our S6 and our 5th years have PSE and then a study, but obviously flipped. So we were able to take those 2 periods to do our presentations. The judges were mixed for our semi-final, like I said. So just whoever was free to give them feedback. And then for our final, it was more prescriptive with our head teacher, one of our class teachers, and I forgot to mention we had a pupil as well. So we had a 5th year pupil on our sort of judging panel, which was really good. She had really good insight sort of during the deliberations, which was great. So yeah, it was just done like that. I think something from the semi-final was because we had 2 different sets of teachers for periods 4 and periods 5, it wasn't as sort of coherent. It's definitely better when you've got staff that are available for the whole duration, because yeah, they're having to sort of fill in the other teachers on what they've seen and vice versa. So yeah, it was good having the 2 periods blocked out.
Great. We have had, I'll share a little bit more detail on this in due course, but we've had in-person judges in school, as Rowan's outlined. We've also had external judges dialing into some finals via Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be through video call as well, and that's been quite effective. So that is a way of kind of including that external engagement that you might normally have with your final with community partners in the current circumstances. So Rowan, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. It's very much appreciated. And it's great to hear about your process. Again, kind of congratulations on a really good final. It was lovely to be part of it. And we've been delighted to be able to kind of showcase your experience today. So thank you, and good luck at your parents' evening.
Yes, no, that's okay. Thank you very much.
I hope that all goes well, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah,
Take
speak
care.
to you soon. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Great. So welcome, Rhiannon. Thank you so much for joining us. We've recorded Rowan's input, so don't worry at all. You can catch up on that. It's not a problem. She was just sharing some of her insights around her YPI programme delivery this year. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take you through some slides that we have put together just to give a little bit of context on YPI in 2021 and hopefully provide some additional ideas and thoughts for you. Please don't worry at all if any of you aren't able to contribute via a microphone or anything like that. Don't worry, you can type into the chat box if you're able to see the chat box. Rhiannon, I can see that you've been able to do that. So if you've got any questions at all or want to make any comments, please feel free to just type those in. And Lindsay is keeping an eye on the chat box as well. So she'll bring in any sort of comments or questions that you have into the discussion. So I'm just going to share my screen. And no matter how many times I practice this, it's never quite as smooth as I think it's going to be. So in terms of just a couple of protocols, I think everybody is naturally doing this anyway. We'll just ask people to keep your microphones on mute when someone's speaking, just to avoid any interference. We can offer you the chance to pop a star in the chat box if you'd like to speak. So if you pop a star in, we'll know that you've got a question and we can bring you into the discussion. And if you agree with any comments or points that people are making during the course of the conversation, please feel free to pop a plus into the chat bar as well, just to sort of demonstrate or give us a wave or a thumbs up or whatever that might be, just to demonstrate that you're maybe thinking the same or you agree. It would be really good at this point to for you to take a moment just to pop into the chat box who you are and where you're from. Which school you're from, which region, and perhaps maybe just let us know which year group and which subject area you're planning to deliver YPI in this year, or you have delivered or you are delivering YPI in this year, depending on what stage of the process you're at. I should hopefully still be able to see the chat box while I am sharing my screen. So in terms of today, we have heard from Rowan. We wanted to kind of jump straight in and hear from her to just maximise the time that she had with her other commitments. I'm going to take you through now just a few slides on maximising the impact of the launch, and we're going to talk a little bit more about supporting charity engagement, although Rowan's comments at the beginning have been really, really helpful and insightful around that. We're going to talk a little bit about delivering an impactful YPI showcase, the lasting impact and legacy of the programme, and use of our new delivery resources. So for any of you that haven't yet seen those delivery resources, I'm going to take you through just a little bit of detail on those. So, and then we're going to move into a very open and interactive discussion. And what I would say is, even while I'm speaking, if you want to jump in with a comment, please don't feel that you kind of just have to listen to me. If you want to jump in, this is intended to be very interactive, so feel free at any point. So in terms of the 2019-20 academic year, so the previous academic year, as you all know very well by now, schools closed in March, and we were about halfway through the completion of YPI programmes in Scottish schools for 2019-20 when schools closed. That meant that there was a kind of significant shortfall in the amount of grant funding that we'd been able to award to schools in comparison to what we would have done if all of those YPI finals had been able to be concluded as normal. So we were able to pivot and offer a programme called Your Community Fund, which was a time adapted or a time limited adapted version of the YPI programme. And we were delighted to be able to award a further £200,000 in awards to 50 teams who submitted winning submissions through that process. So that was a really wonderful example of how students and teachers were able to adapt to producing a digital creative product rather than a live presentation, as you might often normally do with YPI. And a lot of the learning that we had through those digital, seeing those digital presentations and submissions has fed into some of the adaptations that we've made, and also some of the insight that we've been able to share with you as schools for your programmes this year, in light of the fact that much of the work that's being done in schools and in our own organisation as well is being delivered through digital means. Last year, the most prominent issues, may not surprise you to see this, that came through YPI and YCF were mental health, health and food poverty. And we're really delighted this year that we have 250 schools signed up to deliver YPI in this very unusual year that we are currently experiencing. So that will result in a significant amount of grant funding going into local charities at a time when it's probably never been more needed. And we are very conscious of the opportunity for young people to continue to speak up about social issues they are particularly passionate about, particularly in a year where all of them have had that united experience of going through a lockdown and all of the kind of challenges that has brought in their local communities. As I mentioned, the hashtag Never More Needed is something that we have been supporting in terms of the campaign that the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations has been promoting on various social media, and it's this idea that really the voluntary sector in Scotland, the third sector in Scotland, has never been more needed and never been more stretched. And that's where we see, as an organisation, the role of YPI and the role of you as teachers and practitioners in supporting YPI has never been more needed. And that the opportunity for young people to continue to speak up about those issues is really essential. So we will continue to support the campaign that's going on there, and do feel free, if that's something that you feel ties into your own social media and your own schools, feel free to dig a little deeper and find out a bit more information about that. In terms of programme delivery in 2020-21, at a very early stage, we were really clear that as an organisation we needed to adapt to this year and to how things were going to be, and the challenges that you as a school and we as an organisation were likely to face. So one of the kind of first things that we looked at was the programme development session, which, as most of you will know, is delivered with your delivery teachers, with yourselves as lead teachers, if that's your role, and then with a member of your senior leadership team as well. We are able to deliver all of those programme development sessions with each school remotely, and that can be via any platform that suits you. It could be Zoom, it could be Teams, it could be Google Meet, it could be vScene. And we're very keen that that continues to be a session for you that can be maximised in terms of value and be really timed at the best possible time for you as a school. So that may happen a bit in advance of when you plan to launch. It may happen very close to when you plan to launch, but it's really critical still that we are able to provide you with that introductory session and to reflect on your programme from last year, wherever that might have gotten to, and then to be able to plan and put the logistics in place for the programme delivery this year. So that PDS remains an essential part of the programme, and our team and ourselves as a central team will be, your YPI regional facilitators will be continuing to support that process remotely, and will be as flexible as they possibly can to accommodate that. In terms of the second sort of touch point or milestone of the programme that we would generally support you with in person, that's the programme launch. For many of you, you might have experienced a launch assembly in the past facilitated by a member of our team. This year, again, we quite quickly recognised that certainly for the early part of the year and potentially for longer, that schools perhaps wouldn't be able to accommodate external visitors, and perhaps wouldn't be able to accommodate bringing large groups of young people together into an assembly type fashion. We have therefore invested in a student launch video, which again some of you might have seen, and it is accompanied by a PowerPoint presentation and some guidance notes as well. And that student launch video is around 9 minutes long. It's available on our website. And it provides really a kind of a condensed introduction to the YPI programme, as well as being used to launch the programme with a bit of excitement to the students who are taking part. Also a really good introductory overview for others in your school as well, other staff and potentially other students, and also external partners within the community that you might want to engage with your YPI programme. Because it really does provide that sort of that whistle-stop introduction, and it's a good starter overview. So I'd highly recommend you using it to launch the programme and to the participating year group, but also to consider where else it could be used in terms of broadening awareness of the programme. And we have also been supporting schools to retain some of the wider aspects of an in-person launch as well, and that might be the idea of having multi-stakeholder inputs. So how can you still harness an input from a member of the senior leadership team or the head teacher? Can you still include some input from previous winners or alumni of the programme so that young people can hear from their peers? And can you include some reflections from your previous winning charity or a previous winning charity on the benefit of the grants and what that money has gone towards and what kind of work it's supported, particularly perhaps in light of the kind of COVID situation that many or all charities will be dealing with at the moment. So some ideas there are that perhaps a written testimonials being provided that teachers can read out, or we've had quite a lot of senior leadership team members, alumni and charities recording a short video input, and that's able to be screened at a classroom-based launch. So the resources that we've put in place allow you to launch the programme in the classroom to your young people within a manageable setting, but still with that impact and helping them to understand the importance of the process that they're about to go through and what that will involve. In terms of the YPI Showcase or your YPI Final, as you might call it, it can be delivered in a variety of formats. We've heard from Rowan today on how their format, how their final was delivered. This year, it can be a closed door final with no audience. It can be a smaller scale event if you feel that that is more manageable for you in the current circumstances. It can be a live online final with a virtual judging panel or an in-person judging panel, or we can look at creating pre-recorded presentations, which can then be critiqued online by a meeting of your judging panel. Those pre-recorded presentations might be your traditional live presentation on the stage, or they might actually be the creation of a digital product. So you might task young people with creating a digital product, which is their presentation, but maybe not perhaps in the conventional sense of what we might consider to be a presentation. So there are lots and lots of options there for finals, and please don't be sort of intimidated or concerned that you're not going to be able to replicate perhaps your usual in-person YPI final with an audience and so on, because there are lots and lots of ways that we can work with you this year. It's really important that your regional facilitator is part of your final, because they will still need to facilitate your judging, but again, that can be done remotely and we can be flexible with that. And as you've heard, your judging panel can be a mixture of internal or external judges or both, and all of that is fine. If they are internal judges, I'd probably recommend that you try to select people who are maybe a little bit distant from the YPI programme and not too invested in it, just so that you can try to get that little bit of independence into the process. I'm not able to see the chat box too well, so I'm thinking that Lindsay will probably highlight to me if there's anything that anyone that wants to jump in. In terms of third sector engagement, again, we've heard some really great reflections on that so far, so I'm not going to dwell on the point, but we are really, really keen to ensure continued meaningful engagement with charities this year. Whilst that may not be able to be in person, which is unfortunate, there are lots of other ways that we can continue to do this. And so we can have a chat in a moment about a continued sort of discussion around that, how students can really leverage their experience with charities to make that as impactful as possible in their final presentations. Some schools have been asking charities to provide a short video overview of their services that they've then been able to show young people, and that has worked quite well in lieu of perhaps a charities fair. It's almost providing a virtual charities fair, and charities will students, sorry, to be able to get that introduction to social issues and to charities as an initial overview before they go on to make more in-depth contact with them. So lots and lots of options there. In terms of programme delivery in general, you'll have heard me saying that at the outset that we're incredibly committed to supporting you as a school to make YPI work for you this year and to maximise the reach and impact of the programme in the current circumstances. We will be very flexible. We have a number of kind of concessions and adaptations that we can make to the programme this year. So if you are struggling to envisage how it could work, please do get in touch with us, because there's a lot of flexibility within the programme this year in terms of the year group size that it's delivered to, the programme structure and the timeline. And we will work individually with you to find a solution that works for you. And if there is a return to blended learning wholesale across Scotland, which thankfully at the moment is looking sort of fairly unlikely in terms of the rhetoric that's coming out, but if there is a return to whole school blended learning, or even that you as an individual school return to blended learning, or perhaps as local authority, we can draw on our experience from your community fund to make sure that your programme is concluded, and that we definitely award a £3,000 grant into the charity. The final point in this section is that we do have some new programme resources available. We have updated the delivery resource and very much streamlined that to allow for a more focus on skill development, success criteria and learning outcomes associated with each stage of the process. We outline YPI now within that resource as a 4-part process. And the student workbook has been updated to accommodate or to correlate with that, in terms of, again, for young people more explicitly focusing on the skills journey that they'll embark on as part of YPI. And we have created a new Leading YPI in Your School resource. So if you are the lead teacher within your school setting, there's lots of really good advice within that around the sort of the wider elements of leading the programme and planning a launch, planning a final and so on, and delivering your programme development session beyond sort of the practical delivery of the programme. All of those are available on our shiny new website, which within the educator zone, and we'll circulate links to those after this session. This diagram just briefly outlines the process, which some of you will be more familiar with and some of you perhaps less so, in terms of those 4 parts that I outlined. So the process of YPI hasn't changed in any way whatsoever. We've merely kind of streamlined that roadmap. And so we're still looking at the process, outlining those 4 main parts around understanding social issues, exploring the third sector, charity selection and active research, and then the presentation development and the YPI showcase. And really importantly as well, there's a lot more in our new resource around extending the impact and looking at the legacy of that whole process too.